As I promised, we're going to talk about organizing patterns in these informative speeches coming up. It directly follows up on outlining, because what I'm talking about here is the order you put your main points in. You're going to put them in some order for a reason. Up until now, we've talked about the order being least to most important, but I'm going to give you some options here, and I hope you think through them for each of your speeches and figure out which one's going to work best for you. Okay, here we go. Okay, first of all, what they are. And please, if you're taking notes, you don't need to draw that little diagram in the middle there. These are patterns for your main points, and you can use them for your subpoints too. That illustrates the relationship between the points, why the first one is first, the second one is second, the third one is third, that has a meaning. Right? It's the way your speech is structured. So that's what we're going to look at here. Again, that's maybe a complicated way of saying something perfectly obvious, but here's an example. You can use a chronological pattern. In other words, in time order. So for instance, here I have a history of the Italian mafia. And I have three categories, starting with the oldest, the ancient origins, then the 19th century, then the 20th century. On the right, you see archaeological eras, and you can discuss each of them in time order. Units of time can be anything you want. In one case, it's centuries. In another case, it's eras. You could discuss the Big Bang in terms of the first 3 seconds of the Big Bang. What happened in the first second? What happened in the second second? What happened in the third second? And that would be your 3 main points for your speech. So the time unit doesn't matter. But something you need to be aware of if you choose this pattern is that it can be really boring. It's real obvious and it's real easy to use, but unless there's a reason you're showing it in time order, this may not be the best choice. For instance, if you're talking about a biography of somebody, the obvious choice might be where they're born, where they grew up, how they were educated, beginning of their career, whatever. Maybe you want to think about something else that might be a little more interesting to your audience. Topics like training, influences, their contribution, and people influenced by them. That might be a more interesting way to talk about a musician, for instance. So don't fall back on this. Use it if, as I say, time is what matters. You're trying to show how something evolved or devolved across time. And here's spatial. Spatial arrangement means literally something is arranged in space. Here we have various, I don't know, planets, asteroids, whatever, in space. But on the right, you can also see that we've arranged the Italian mafia in Italy and again in the United States. Again, your units of space can be anything. I could, if it were at all interesting, do a speech about this room. I could talk about what's on the right wall, what's on the left wall, what's in front of me, what's behind me, what's in the ceiling, what's on the floor. That would be spatial. I could describe what's under the hood of your car in spatial terms. I could, say, all right, let's open the hood, look straight down, and you'll see a skinny, deep metal tank with a cap on the top of it. That's your radiator. Yes, there's water inside. If you look past that toward the center and you move all the hoses and wires out of the way, you'll see there's a big old block of metal there. If you look closely, you'll see it's two pieces of metal bolted together. The bottom is the block, the top is the header, and inside there are the pistons going up and down, just like you've been told. If you look at the top of that, you'll see that there are 4 or 6 or 8 matching wires coming out of it. Those are your spark plug wires. Go ahead, pull one of them off, and you'll see the spark plug sitting right there. It works exactly like they tell you. Spark pushes, ignites the fuel, pushes the piston, just like that. Put that spark plug wire back on until it clicks. If you trace those around on the left or the right, whichever way they go, you'll find that they go to a cylinder with a cap on top and a couple of clips holding it together. The top is your distributor cap, and the bottom is your distributor. And that signals to those wires what order they're supposed to go in so they don't all go off at once and blow up your car. And I could go on like that and describe what's under the hood of a car. That's spatial. That's describing something in space. That can be really exciting for an audience because it involves a lot of visualization. They have to picture things, and audiences love picturing things. Just a minute, let me show you what I mean here. Hi. Today I want to tell you a little bit about how I spent my summer vacation. I went to a little village, away off the beaten path, and it was the most amazing place. There was a town square in the middle of town, except it was a rectangle, and it's what you'd expect. It had grass and trees and some benches. Nobody really ever hung out there. But they did hang out over on the right side of that square that was a rectangle. And across the street from the rectangle were all the shops, the shopping area for town. And these were little 2-story buildings side by side, bunched up together, but each one was painted a different color. So there'd be a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one and a white one like that. And nobody ever went in the shops. Because the way it worked, the shopkeeper and his family lived on the top floor. The bottom floor was all full of merchandise. So you never went inside. You just walked up and the shopkeeper would be standing there and say, "Joe, I need 6 oranges." And Joe would say, "No, you don't want the oranges." I'd say, "What?" "They're not any good." I said, "Joe, I'm making an orange cake. I need oranges." And Joe would say, "You're making a tangerine cake. You need tangerines." And he'd go, "Okay, fine. How many tangerines do I need if I needed 6 oranges?" And he'd tell you, and you'd buy the tangerines right there and hand him the money. He'd go inside, get them for you, bring them back out. And this was happening all up and down the sidewalk, people talking and laughing and bargaining and buying and selling and all sorts of activity. On the other side of that town square were some houses. And they were pretty close together, not back to back, but pretty close together. But the interesting thing about them is each front yard had a fence between the house and the sidewalk. All different kinds of fences. Split rail fences and chain link fences and post fences and whatever, all of them. But the kids had figured out that long stretch of front lawns made a great playground. And every day after school, they'd be out there playing soccer or kick the can. It was long enough that they really could get one game up here and one game down there. And none of the neighbors minded that the kids were running up and down their lawns all afternoon long. But the most amazing thing about this village was if you looked straight ahead, you saw a European-style cathedral. I mean, a real cathedral with flying buttresses and gargoyles and a bell tower. It was all there. Until you looked at it sideways. And then you realized that somebody had built a miniature cathedral there at the end of the square. It was about 2 stories tall with a tiny bell tower on the top. You know how European cathedrals have that big bell sound, right? That chimes on the hour, you know, bum, bum, bum. Well, one thing that gave this cathedral away was that they couldn't put a big bell in their little bell tower. So in the hour, it would ring bum, 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 like that. And that's the public square, the shops, the houses, and the cathedral that I visited on my summer vacation. Thank you. Next up, one we've already worked with, least to most important. And again, to repeat myself, this is from the audience's point of view. So for this particular audience, how the mafia got started is least important. What's most important to them is their external activities, things that affected society outside the mafia, alcohol, the rackets, government, whatever. But you know about this, and you know it's least and most important because you want to end big, you don't want to end small. So, yeah. You also have simple to complex. Okay. Again, like least to most important, we're talking here about from easy to hard for your audience. If you start with hard, I guarantee you'll lose them. And for this audience, easy is the structure of the mafia, then the origins and the external activities, and then the turf wars. Okay. Let's take another topic. The kinds of math you'll study in your educational career. And I want to start with calculus. Oh, wait. If I'm going to do a speech on math and I start with calculus, chances are pretty good that most of you are going, oh, please no. So let me try that again. And I'm not going to stand up and move the camera around this time, but imagine I'm making a speech. And by the way, these speeches are not complete. They don't have full intros or transitions or conclusions, but I'll give you a feel for what I'm talking about. In this case, again, the types of math you'll study in your educational career. Let's talk about arithmetic. Simple enough. In any arithmetic problem, you are solving for an unknown. That's it. You're solving for X. And sometimes it moves so fast, our brains are so sharp, we don't see the X. If I say 3 plus 4 equals, you see 7. But if I ask you the square root of 126, maybe you see that there is an unknown, an X there. After that, you're probably going to take algebra. And algebra is simply solving for one unknown in terms of other unknowns. So for instance, if you have y over 3 equals x, okay? You don't know how many y's you have. You're not going to know how many x's you have. But what you do know is for every third of a y, you have an x. So for instance, if you were asked to, you're an architect, and you're asked to design a building for the city, and there's a city code that says, okay, you have to have 3 women's restrooms for every 1 men's restroom. You don't know how many restrooms you're going to have. You just got the assignment. But what you do know is that 3x in this case equals 1y. Okay? It's a proportion. It's a ratio. And that's what algebra is. From there, you're going to go on to geometry. Now, there are two types of geometry, but they're basically the same thing. In plane geometry, you are solving either for the outside edge or the surface area of a regular two-dimensional object. A circle, a square, a triangle. In solid geometry, and they move you to that, and they may not even let you know, you're now working in 3 dimensions. So you're solving for the surface area or the volume of a regular 3-dimensional object. A globe, a pyramid, a cube. That's geometry. From there, you go on probably to trigonometry, and that's the relationship of angles to each other. And after that, you might just take calculus. Now, calculus is geometry all over again. There are other things you can do with it, but essentially you are solving for, in basic calculus, you're solving for the outside edge or the surface area of a 2-dimensional object. Only this time it isn't regular. It's a weird shape. Advanced calculus, solid geometry. You're solving for the surface area or the volume of a 3-dimensional object, but it's not regular. Again, it's a weird shape. So for instance, if you wanted to buy sod for your lawn, and your lawn isn't a perfect rectangle, it's got cutouts for the driveway or a tree in the middle of it, and you don't want to buy any extra. In order to find out how much sod you need, you're going to need basic calculus. And if you want to recover your sofa, okay, and you don't want to buy more upholstery fabric than you have to because that stuff is expensive, in order to calculate how much you need to cover the surface area of that very irregular object, you're going to need advanced calculus. And that's it. Arithmetic, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, and calculus. The types of mathematics you'll study in your educational career. Okay, simple to complex. Here's another topical pattern for you. Familiar to unfamiliar. In this case, I've organized my points by what my audience knows something about to what they don't. They know something about the external activities of the mafia. They know something about the turf wars. They don't know much about how it's structured and know absolutely nothing about how it got started. Another topical pattern. We've seen 3 patterns now based on topics. We've seen least to most important, simple to complex, familiar to unfamiliar. If you look at these, I've used the same main points in each of them. You can take a speech with the main points you have, rearrange them, and make a whole different speech out of it. In this case, what you need to know about the mafia for least to most important. The complexity of the mafia, simple to complex. And what you don't know about the Italian mafia, okay, familiar to unfamiliar. You can use each of these patterns or any of these patterns and play around with them. If you think you have a topic that isn't very inspiring, try another one, try another pattern. You might come up with something pretty interesting. Next up, we have causal. In this case, multiple causes to a single effect. I want to do a speech on the effect of, I want to do a speech on the end of the Italian mafia, that's the effect. And I'm going to go through 4 causes. I'm going to talk about the informants that happened in the 60s, just people turning them in. The La Cosa Nostra arrests in the 70s. The RICO arrests, when they started confiscating everybody's ill-gotten gains in the 80s. And finally, by the 90s, we can talk about the end of the mafia in terms of competition from the Chinese mafia, the Mexican mafia, etc. Okay. Simple speech on the end of the Italian mafia from about multiple causes that got us that effect. Oh, by the way, that word up there is causal at the beginning of that title, C-A-U-S-A-L. I often read it as casual, but it's causal, just so you know. We have another causal pattern, in this case, single cause to multiple effects, and here we're talking about the effects of the mafia on society. We could talk about the end of prohibition, the end of prohibition of alcohol. You could even make a case that the mafia has been enough part of the marijuana trade that to some extent the abolition of marijuana is an attempt to end the mafia too. You can talk about one of the effects of the mafia being Las Vegas, which wouldn't be anything bigger than Palm Desert, except the mafia brought in prostitution and gambling. Okay, so now it's become this big vacation spot. We could talk about the effects of the mafia on government. Certainly on city governments, on the East Coast for years and still to some extent. There's mafia influence on city councils and on voting and on all sorts of things. Also in Chicago, mafia was very influential and usually got their way. And if you watch Oliver Stone's movie, maybe you want to say that the mafia was involved in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It's a little shakier, but it's a possibility. And finally, we can look at one of the effects of the mafia as the street gangs of today. Yes, there's a very clear line there. Let's take a look again at the organization of the mafia from the guy at the head with the best friend and the layers of people. You have the same organization in street gangs. You have the same, a lot of the same business practices. There are, extortion, gambling, illicit substances. It's all there. The tactics are the same. My grandfather, who lived in Chicago, actually saw 2 gangland shootings outside his high school window. The gangland style shootings where the mafia rolls by with their Tommy guns and blows people away. What is that but a drive-by? Both groups even have distinctive styles of dress. And clearly, the mafia, the Italian mafia, has sort of defined what gangs are. So there you go. But what I want to point out here is I have just given you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 patterns for one topic, the mafia. And I've made a different speech out of each of them. This is what I'm trying to tell you. You can make a different speech out of the same topic just by changing the organizational pattern. So if you have a topic that you think is maybe boring, people have heard it, they know what you're going to say, you want to change it up, try one of these other patterns. Go through them all. How could you do your topic by this pattern or that spatially, or least to most important, or single cause to multiple effects? Not every topic will do every pattern, but every topic will do several of them. Pick the best. This is part of the creative process in speech making. This is where you get to make some decisions. So please go ahead and make the decisions. Thank you.